friends, it's Christy back with you on the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the new Presents and Pupcakes stamp set by Yuzu. So I have stamped those images out on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with extreme black hybrid ink. And I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers to match some pattern paper. So I'm flipping through the Rainbow Love 6x6, choosing a piece that I want to use as my inspiration for my color palette, and then I'll tuck that underneath my cardstock panel so I can refer to that. Then I'm going to start with this cute dog on the right here. I'm going to color him to be a white dog, so I'm using W00, W1, and W3. When I was young, we used to have American Eskimos as my mom was like a breeder and she showed them competitively. So this dog looks so much like some of the dogs that we had. I just had to color him white. So I used the W3 first and used that to lay in all of my shadows on the outer edges, any place where a body part is overlapping in the curve of the tail, where the tail is overlapping the back, also on the feet where the paws are kind of curved up, all of that, and then blending out with the W1. And then I'll use the W00 as my lightest, but I'm not going to fill him in completely because I do want him to look like a white dog. So I'm just going to blend that out and let it fade into the white cardstock in the center, and that will be my highlight. While I have those shades out, I'll also use them for that really fluffy white area on the other dog's chest. I just wanted to tie in those shades somewhere else. So I'm going to repeat the same process, leaving the center of that white, just putting a little extra shadow under that bandana where that would be casting one. And then I'm going to move on to his face, and I'm going to use E30, E31, and E33 for that. I'll also add a little bit of that to his belly. So he's going to be a two-toned dog. So this is the lighter patches. I'm going to use the E33 first for my shadows, and I'll blend that out with the E31. And then I'll use that E30 in the center, right around his mouth and his nose. And I'll bring that up on his belly as well. I'll also use these shades to color in the 3 dog biscuits that are sticking up out of the cake. And I just put my shading on the right hand side and the highlight on the left just to keep them consistent. For the rest of his body, I'm going to keep that E33, but that's going to become my lightest. And I will add in the E35 and E37. So again, I'm starting with that E37, coloring darkest to lightest, adding in those shadows, and I'm going to just carefully color those in. I don't want him to get too dark, but I definitely want to have those areas of variation so that he looks more dynamic and just three-dimensional. Then I'll bring in the E35 and start to blend that out, making sure that I color right over the edge of that E37, kind of pulling that darkest color into this mid-tone so that I don't get any harsh lines. And I'm just going to continue to blend that out, making sure that I leave some room on each of his limbs and also around the eyes for that lightest shade, the E33. I'm going to bring that down on the outer part of his ears and then across his face, down on his eyes so that they are nice and bright and you can still see those features. And I'll fill in the rest of his legs as well. Just bringing that in on his belly so it overlaps a little bit of the lighter shade so I get more of a smooth transition from those areas. And then I'm going to move over to my cat, and for the kitty I'm using Y32, Y35, and Y38. So I wanted to go with something that was almost like a mix between the orange and the yellow that are in that pattern paper. So I went with this kind of like a yolk color for the kitty. So I started with the Y38, blending out with the Y35, And then I'll use the Y32 in the center of the face and also the front of the body. And then I want to add some detail to her, but I'm going to let that dry first and move on to the flames on my candles. I just used the darkest two shades for that. And then I'm coming in with the Y38 again and adding in some little stripes, just doing long, thin triangles. And the way I centered that on the face, it can be tricky, especially since her head is tilted toward the right, is I just make sure that that first little long triangle is right above her nose, and that way it looks even when you put the other ones on either side. The next combo that I'm using is RV10, RV11, and RV13, and this is to mimic that lighter pink that is in that pattern paper. So for the dog on the left and the kitty, I use the darkest two shades for their tongues. For the dog on the right, I'm going to use all three since his tongue is bigger. I also use just the lightest two shades in their ears and for the rest of their mouths. And then I'll use the lighter two shades for their rosy cheeks as well. I did start with the RV10 just to see how that would look, and then I'm going to add in a little RV11 to deepen that, and then I'll go back to the RV10 to blend that out. And that color is light enough that it'll really soften into their fur tone. And then I use the RV13 for the kitty's nose. Then I'm switching to RV13, RV14, and RV17 to mimic that darker kind of fuchsia pink that is in that pattern paper. And I'm going to do one of the balloons, just putting the shadow on the right hand side and leaving a little bit of space on the outer edge for a rim light, and then making sure that the center is nice and soft so it looks transparent. I will do a second layer of the RV14 and the RV13 just to smooth out that blend a little bit more. And then I will also use the RV14 to color in some of the stripes on the candle on the left, and also a stripe on the cake wrapper or cupcake. And then I'm using YR04, YR07, and YR09 to do another stripe, and I will do one of the pieces of confetti with those shades as well. Next, I'll bring in yellow, basically working my way through that pattern paper in rainbow order. So I'm using Y13, Y15, and Y17 to do another stripe and another piece of confetti. Next up is green, but as you can see from that pattern paper, it's more of a yellow green. So I went with YG01, YG03, and YG05. And I did the last stripe on the cupcake wrapper because I'm doing every other one and then leaving the others white. And then I'm going to do the bandana around the dog's neck. So I use YG05 first and then YG03, blended out with YG01, and then added a little extra YG05. Then I'm using BG10 and BG11 for the frosting on the cupcake and leaving the center white. I just wanted it to look like a different white than the dog. So I used the blue tones instead, and then I'm also going to use those on the white stripes between the wrappers. I'm also going to use BG11, BG13, and BG15 for another balloon. So I'm going to use the BG15 first on that one, laying in the shadows, and again leaving a little bit of a rim light, blending out with the BG13, and then the BG11 is going to be my highlight. Moving to the dark blue in the pattern paper, I went with B24, B26, and B29. I'm going to use this for the dog food dish, putting the B29 on the outer edges and blending toward the center with the B26, and then the B24 for the highlight. And then I'm going to do another one of the little confetti bits in this combo as well. The purple in that pattern paper is kind of cool toned purple, so I went with V12, V15 and V17 to match that. And I'm going to do my last balloon. I'm also going to do the last confetti and the last candle. And then off screen, I'm going to go back and add in color to the little sprinkles that are on the cupcake frosting. I just picked one of the shades from each of the combos that I had used throughout the video and just dotted those in really quickly. And once I'm done with that, all that's left is the dog's noses. So for that, I'm using W3, W5, and W7. Little W7 down at the bottom, blending up with the W5, and then putting a highlight at the top of the nose with the W3. I'll grab a black Sakura Jelly Roll pen to go over the dog's eyes. Just make them a little bit darker and shiny. And then I'm going to trim these images out with their matching dies. For my focal panel, I'm taking a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and the English Brick Wall stencil, and then I'm going to blend on some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink. So you can tape that down if you like, but I'm just going to hold it still with my hands, making sure I'm applying firm pressure so that doesn't shift. And then I'm going to blend that ink on in a light circle towards the top of that panel. And then I'll come back with a little extra ink in the center, and there you can see how that's looking. I just wanted it to be a subtle background detail. I'll also press some ink onto an acrylic block, add some water to make that a little bit more fluid, and then I'll splatter that using a fine-tipped paintbrush. Once that has dried, I trimmed it down with the third smallest of the A2 Stitch Rectangle Stacks Set 2, and then I pop that in my MISTI so that I can stamp my sentiment. I'm going to do Put Your Paws Up, It's Time to Celebrate using VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm going to stamp that down a couple of times to make sure that it is nice and bold. I will set that aside and pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using some Caribbean Sea cardstock, which I scored and folded to make a standard A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall with a top fold. And I'm going to take a couple of the other images that didn't make it to the front of the card, a little dog with a ribbon in his mouth and an open gift, and the sentiment that says it's time for presents and cupcakes, which I think is really cute. And I stamped that down a couple of times as well. And now I'm ready to start assembling. So I have trimmed down another piece of that Caribbean Sea cardstock to be just slightly larger than the focal panel. So I get that nice pop of that beautiful blue on the outside edges. It just gives me a little bit of a matte to separate it from the white of the pattern paper, which I also trimmed down with the A2 Stitch Rectangle Stacks Set 2. I just used the largest die on that one. So I'm going to adhere that to my card base, and it's basically going to give me the same amount of cardstock showing on the outside edges. So it just looks very nice and uniform. I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of the focal panel and pop that up on the card to give it a bit of dimension, and then I can bring in my images. So I want my dogs and my kitty to be in the forefront, so I'm going to use them as a placeholder to figure out where I want my balloons to go, because I want those to be tucked in the back. So I'm just making sure that the height is correct before I adhere my main images down, my critters. So once I have the balloons right, I will start adding the little critters, and I wanted to make sure that the kitty tail is kind of in front of the dog that is on the right, so that it really looks like they're one image almost. So I'm just making sure to kind of tuck them evenly and make sure there's about the same amount of space on both the left and the right hand side from the dog's hind legs there. And then I'm going to take this little birthday cupcake and add that right down in front. Make sure that's on there nice and straight. And then I'll decorate the areas in the background around the balloons with these bits of confetti. I am going to change my mind about where I want to put that blue one. because I wanted to have it kind of mixed up. So because I already had one of the straighter pieces at the top, I decided to move that straighter piece down and then have the curly piece up at the top opposite the yellow one. And then all that was left was to add a bit of glitter. I think glitter always is fun on a birthday card because it just adds that extra bit of festiveness. So I'm going to add it to all of the balloons. I just put it on the right hand side since that's where the deepest shadows were. I'm also going to put it on the edges of the frosting on that little pup cake. And then I'm also going to add just a little bit to some of the areas on the confetti strips. And that is going to finish up this card, so I will pick that up and tip it into the light so you can see all of that sparkle and shine, and give you another peek at the inside as well. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I'm a huge animal lover, so I had so much fun playing with this set. If you did like it, be sure to leave me a comment down below, and make sure you're subscribed to My Favorite Things for even more inspiration. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.